Hello, good afternoon. It's Lindsay from Freedom Media WA. I'm just waiting for everything to connect up. So this is a live stream. Today, as you can see on the flyer that I have posted up on the screen, there has been scheduled motion 13, the Indigenous Voice to Parliament. So this is an Australian Labor Party or the WA Labor Party motion. They have tabled this motion for debate. You can see this information on the parliamentary website. I am going to be bringing you that. You can just see that the bell has just gone. They're coming in now for that. As soon as they have started, I will bring you audio from that particular debate. But leading into that, I just want to bring you to reiterate in relation to this particular message. The Honourable Nick Goiran MLC has been pushing this particular issue for some time. He's been asking for the then ex-Premier Mark McGowan and yesterday asked Premier Roger Cook, will the WA government release the information that the federal government has provided to the WA government about the voice to Parliament? Let's just have a listen to Nick Goiran about one of those questions.
The Honourable Nick Goiran.
President, my question without notice, of which some notice has been given as the Leader of the House representing the Premier, I refer the Premier's stated intention to campaign in favour of changing the Constitution to establish an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. And I ask, 1, has the Premier been briefed on which chapter of the Constitution will be amended to include the voice? 2, if yes, which of the 8 chapters will be amended? And 3, so that all Western Australians might be privy to the same level of detail about the proposed constitutional amendment before making their decision, will the Premier table the last briefing note he received about the voice prior to making his public declaration of support?
Leader of the House.
Thanks, President. I thank the honourable member for some notice of the question. 1 to 3, the McGowan government supports changing the Australian Constitution to establish an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Information on the referendum on whether to update the Constitution is publicly available. The structure and role of the voice would be decided by the Australian Parliament through legislation.
So there we go. That's a little bit of a prelude. I'm just going to bring you that back. We're just waiting for Parliament to start. And I'll just bring up some comments.
President.
Almighty God, Creator of the universe, give good order of society in Western Australia, that all members give honour, wisdom and integrity to the role for which they've been chosen, and the decisions and decorum of this Council be always to the advancement of thy glory, the honour of His Majesty and the continued benefit of the people of this state. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. This House acknowledges and honours the traditional owners of the ancestral lands upon which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pays its respects to their elders both past and present.
Okay, so this is available on the WA Parliament website now. So it is publicly available. Just going to cut back to see because it is scheduled, as you can see, well, you may not be able to see, it is scheduled to start at 1 o'clock. So let's have a listen.
Are there any petitions? Are there any statements by ministers and parliamentary secretaries? The parliamentary secretary to the Minister for Seniors and Ageing.
Thank you, President. President, on behalf of the Minister for Seniors and Ageing, I am...
So I will say that there is just a preamble as they normally start in West Australian Parliament. And that's what's going on now. So I'll just keep cutting backwards and forwards. But in the meantime, so I just played you the package of the Honourable Nick Goiran, him asking the questions, and I just want to reiterate here that he has in fact asked this question a number of times, including yesterday when it was then, the current Premier, Roger Cook, his first day in Parliament, and he put this question to him. And one of the comments that Nick Goiran has also put there is saying that so that West Australians might be privy to the same level of detail about the proposed constitutional amendment before making their decision, will the Premier table the last briefing note that he received about the voice to Parliament prior to making his public declaration of support? So that's, and then of course, looking at Hansard, then the Premier has provided an evasive answer. It's not even worth the time reading it out. I'll just cut back and have a listen. Oh no, I can still see that it would probably still going through just some housekeeping at the beginning. But I just felt that perhaps it may be important that those that were not aware that this was in fact happening today. And again, I'll just bring this up for you to see. Okay, on the screen now is the weekly bulletin, which you can see from Parliament, and it lists there Wednesday, 14th of June, that's today obviously, 1 p.m, motion 13, again to reiterate, that is a Labor Party motion. They've tabled this motion. Now, those that may not be familiar with the way that this actually works, there is a quota system. Each party, based on the number of seats that they hold, get to have a number of, they get a quota, if you like, that's perhaps the best way to describe it, that they can table information to the Parliament. Because of the number of seats that the Labor Party in Western Australia hold, they get 8 quotas where they can raise 8 motions, like this one here, that you may not be able to read on the screen. I apologise for that. Through the 19 sitting weeks of the 52 calendar week year. The Liberal Party get 5, and then you have your independents and what would be fair to describe as one-issue parties, like the Legalised Cannabis Party. They get 1. So I'm just going to bring this back now.
Data-led learnings, report number 23, 2022 to 2023. Better practice guide, security basics for protecting critical infrastructure from cyber threats, report number 24, 2022 to 2023. Information systems application audit, transport management system.
More preamble, as you can hear. So as soon as this, you would expect to see somebody from the Labor Party. So just when I picked this up, I wasn't able to quite see who tabled this motion. And here we go. I'm just going to cut back.
Future Health and Innovation account money during 2023-24.
More preamble. And probably information when you say preamble, you know, they're talking about consolidated revenue and budgets and where money, the public purse is going. Of course, we know that a fair percentage of consolidated revenue, I guess, will be going to the now quitting ex-Premier Mark McGowan with his $274,867 guaranteed pension benefit every year for the rest of his life. And I might also just add, while we're waiting for this to come up, that back in 2001, when that was actually changed, they changed also the parliamentary scheme that should Mark McGowan pass, that it comes on to a person that he is known in a established relationship. Just going to cut back.
For an act to amend the Electoral Act 2007 be introduced and read a first time.
Are there any further notices of motions to introduce bills? Are there any notices of motions for disallowance? Are there any notices of motions? Are there any motions without notice? Members, that takes us to committee reports. And I hope there's a Deputy Chair available to take the chair.
Okay, so that audio cut is not my end, it's the Parliament end. While they go through just business, while there's some shuffling around, moving within the chamber, they kill the audio. Okay, here we go.
Members, we are in consideration of committee reports, and we are considering committee report number 1 on the notice paper, Standing Committee on Estimates and Financial Operations report number 86, consideration of the 2020-21 annual reports, and we have the continuation of remarks by the Honourable Jackie Jarvis. The Honourable Jackie Jarvis.
Deputy Chair, I have no further comments to add, so I will yield my time.
Okay, the consideration of committee reports, that's just more housekeeping leading up to this. So now I hope that some of you, I can see your comments coming through and I appreciate that, and I do hope that you see some value in this. I think it's a particularly important issue that if there is going, let's just cut back.
That will no longer be happening. And for my part, might I just say that that is unfortunate. I was quite looking forward to having that debate. Instead, what we're doing now is consideration of committee reports, and in particular, the Standing Committee on Estimates and Financial Operations 86th report, consideration of the 2020-21 annual reports. Now, that particular report might seem rather routine, but it was anything but that, Deputy Chair, particularly when members consider the ongoing secrecy of the now Cook Labor government, who have continued the legacy of the McGowan Labor government, particularly with respect to health advice. Deputy Chair, I draw to your attention and to members that pursuant to this report, on the 23rd of March last year, there was a public hearing with the Department of Health and the North Metropolitan Health Service. And during that session with the Department of Health, a number of topics were tackled by the Standing Committee, and 2 of them included the Chief Health Officer's advice in relation to public health state of emergency declarations and the Chief Health Officer's advice in relation to state of emergency declarations. But it didn't just stop there, Deputy Chair. There were a number of other areas that were tackled, including the so-called need for the continuation of the Safe WA and Service WA check-ins at public indoor venues, the resources that were being provided to COVID-19 positive cases to enable them to conduct their own contact tracing, the expected peak of the COVID-19 Omicron outbreak and the associated level of public health restrictions, WA Health's access to G2G data during and since the reporting period, adverse effects of COVID-19 vaccines, amongst other things, Deputy Chair. All of these matters were tackled during the committee's consideration during this public hearing with the Department of Health and North Metropolitan Health Service. Now, what we of course now know more than a year later, Deputy Chair, is that the government, the legacy government, continues to adhere to a gold standard of secrecy rather than a gold standard of transparency. I have repeatedly asked for this information to be provided, and yet the government has refused. Now, a couple of recent examples that will interest members, Deputy Chair, include this response that was provided by the Honourable Amber Jade Sanderson in her capacity as the Minister for Health. This is a response that she sent to the Honourable Peter Foster in his capacity as the Standing Committee Chair, Environment and Public Affairs. They were looking into a petition that had been tabled by me, signed by thousands of Western Australians, calling for the health advice and modelling that the government had relied upon.
Oh.
Information by the Standing Committee. The Honourable Minister,
apologies for that,
on the 17th of October last year, responds, and I quote, saying the state government's management of the COVID-19 global pandemic continues to be world-class. It is disappointing to receive a petition from members of the community. Can you imagine, Deputy Chair, that people in Western Australia might have been interested to see or read the advice? Can you imagine that Western Australians might reasonably want to see that advice? And yet, the Minister for Health says that it's disappointing that members of the community would seek this information. Such is the contempt of the Minister for Health with respect to the people of Western Australia. Now, that was the 17th of October last year. Now, of course, a very significant event has occurred since then, Deputy Chair, and that is the change in whom is the Premier of Western Australia. It was, when we were last sitting, the Honourable Mark McGowan, the member for Rockingham. He has since retired. And now we have the member for Kwinana, the Honourable Roger Cook, as the Premier of Western Australia. One of the things that change provided an opportunity for was for a change in political culture from the secrecy that we had seen under Premier McGowan to hopefully something more transparent and accountable under Premier Cook. However, Deputy Chair, we now know that it appears this is not going to happen, that Premier Cook wants to continue the legacy of secrecy that he has inherited from his predecessor. Question time yesterday demonstrates this point perfectly. Yesterday I've asked the Premier in respect to this health advice and modelling whether the reviewers, members will recall that Premier McGowan instructed 3 people in Western Australia to undertake a review of the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, their management and their response. He entrusted 3 Western Australians this job to go and undertake this review. I'd asked Mr McGowan if he would provide that health advice and modelling to the independent reviewers. When I asked that earlier this year, Mr McGowan's inverted quotes helpful response was to say any requests for information from the independent reviewers will be considered. So in other words, instead of proactively providing this information to the reviewers, which you would think would be at the heart of the review, he says, well, I'll only provide it if I'm requested this information. Such was the contemptuous attitude in February of this year. Well, in May, I asked further questions in respect to this matter, and Mr McGowan indicated that a final report is expected to be provided to Cabinet in mid-2023. Yesterday, Deputy Chair, I wanted to see if Premier Cook would take a different attitude, a more transparent and accountable attitude than his predecessor, and regretfully the answer is no in the strongest possible terms. Yesterday I have asked him whether the reviewers requested all of the health advice and modelling. Have the reviewers requested all of the health advice and modelling? Now, an accountable answer to that, a responsible government would respond to that question with either a yes or a no, because either the reviewers have requested all of the health advice and modelling or they have not. Of course, in the typical evasive fashion that we have become accustomed to, there was no such response to that particular question. I asked whether any of the health advice and modelling had been provided to the independent reviewers. Again, a failure to answer, a constructive failure to answer. And then thirdly, I asked, will you table a list of what has been provided to the reviewers? Again, a constructive refusal to answer. Instead of answering any of those 3 questions, Deputy Chair, what we had yesterday was this response, which couldn't possibly be fairly described as an answer. It was as follows, and I quote, "The independent panel have been provided with access to any and all government information that they have requested to inform the review." Well, that's terrific. Does that include the health advice and the modelling that thousands of Western Australians have asked be provided publicly Does it? Yes or no? We don't know because, again, there is this evasive answer. The answer goes on, or the response goes on to say, and I quote, material relied upon by the independent panel to inform its findings and recommendations will be outlined in the final report. Well, once again, Deputy Chair, that is tremendous to be told that obvious statement of fact. It goes without saying that a report tabled by these reviewers will include material that they have relied upon. The question Western Australians want to know is, will that include the health advice and the modelling that the government said underpinned all of their decisions? Will it? Has it been provided to the independent reviewers or not? It's all well and good to say that there's going to be a report that's going to be provided to Cabinet in mid-2023. That's tremendous. Will it include the fact that the health advice and modelling has been provided to them or not? Now, that will fundamentally tell us to what extent this independent review can be properly relied upon by Western Australians, or whether or not it is a sham. And that is what we would like to know, Deputy Chair, and I call upon the government to provide a fulsome answer to those questions.
The Honourable Clara Andrich on the question that the report be noted.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. I welcome the opportunity to also speak on Report 86 of the Standing Committee on Estimates and Financial Operations, titled Consideration of the 2020-21 Annual Reports. And I don't want to really get into what the Honourable Member Nick Goiran was alluding to, but I will probably add comments to say that I'm sure most Western Australians in this state, and certainly many of the ones that I and people certainly on this side of the chamber when speaking to, would agree that the priorities of the government was to save lives, and it cannot be questioned how well the response of the state government was in terms of dealing with COVID-19, and that, in fact, I would probably say quite confidently was the main priority for Western Australians, as opposed to the modelling system. So I just would like to put that to begin with into
it certainly wasn't fiscal responsibility with
like
$580 million spent on rat tests.
To speak on Report 86 today, which is the Joint Standing Committee on Estimates and Financial Operations, titled Consideration of the 2020-21 Annual Reports. Now, this report was in fact tabled in June 2020 by the Honourable Peter Collier, and is a consideration of the annual reports for that period. Now, this report, as stated in the summary, concludes the Legislative Council's Standing Committee on Estimates and Financial Operations considerations of the 2020-21 annual reports, and as it is outlined, the committee outlined in the report met with 5 agencies and had correspondence with 1. Annual reports complete the yearly budget cycle that begins with the appropriation bills and budget papers. And now, whilst budget papers show what an agency does intend to achieve for that particular year, that being both on financial and also on non-financial grounds, annual reports provide an insight into how the agency actually performed in the given year. And
okay, so I think I'm just going to cut back there because there's probably no value in listening to any more that she has to say there. And I noted one of the comments coming that it was interesting on the back end of that she said that the health advice, it can't be questioned. I mean, it can't be any clearer than that. You've just heard Nick Goiran asking the question, will the government or whether the reviewers have requested their health advice, and you have a Labor backbencher there who's responded saying that it just can't be questioned, wait for the review. So just to unpack what we actually saw there, so we just missed the beginning of Nick Goiran, apologies for that, but when he got to his feet, it seems as though the Labor government motion to debate the Indigenous voice to Parliament, a motion that they tabled, and they don't get this quota back. out of the 8. They've lost this now, this opportunity, but it seems that for whatever reason, that the debate is no longer going to go ahead. Now, in relation to that, I guess, and then we've just heard Nick Goiran talking about on the committee paper minutes, which we'll take that as a bonus because it was particularly insightful that he again, and I did listen to Parliament yesterday when he asked the question in particular. I'm just going to cut back just to make sure that, for the want of a better word, that she's still waffling, and hopefully you don't consider that I'm waffling, but let's just have a quick listen.
And 6 FMA, reminding them of their obligations under the FMA, including that they obtain the Treasurer's prior approval under Section 19 of the FMA, should they anticipate an agency special purpose account.
Sounds like more waffle to me. So the debate, for whatever reason, and we probably won't actually know what the reason why the Labor government have foregone their motion to debate. Now, on the parliamentary website, the motion, and again, apologies if you can't see it on the back here, but it was scheduled for 2 hours. So it was a significant motion, and one that the Labor government, and I keep pushing that because that is quite important, that that they actually tabled this motion to discuss the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Now, we've seen in recent weeks that there has been some polling figures come out that talks about the campaign for the yes is not going as well as they would have expected. In fact, it's now swung in the favour of the no vote, and I think politically, we've seen how mainstream media have spun a number of things to gauge the accuracy of those polls. I guess you are the best judge for those particular polls. There's certainly a lot to be said, and the current campaigning for the no vote is suggesting that without the detail, then the best choice to do is to vote no. So I'm not sure how much longer I will continue with this stream, given that the motion to debate, the 2-hour debate, has no longer gone ahead. But, and I guess I probably should also say that it's not unprecedented for that to occur, that a party can use their quota for a motion and decide to discuss other things. But I guess whether it's the pressure of Nick Goiran asking a number of times, including yesterday, the new Premier Roger Cook, to ask him, will he table the advice that he's received from the federal government? Now, if that advice, if you follow the process that Nick Goiran is talking about, the federal government, Labor, provide the advice to the state government. Mark McGowan came out and said that he's going to make a personal declaration based on that advice that he's been privy to, and then he's used, as he departed his position as Premier, to echo his personal views based on the advice. Nick Goiran's challenge to that process is that advice belongs to the people of Western Australia. And if Mark McGowan is privy to that advice and going to form a personal view on that, then the advice should be made available to all West Australians so that they can make up their minds based on and make an informed decision based on the advice that they receive. That's the premise of Nick Goiran's questioning. We were hoping to do that, but then I guess we've moved on, as you've just heard, that the pertinent question that Nick Goiran subsequently asked, and you can just imagine, you know, the pace in which these things go through in Parliament. There's a lot of stuff that happens there, and you know, I can only imagine that Nick would have been prepared to debate this as well as the opposition party because they knew that this motion was on the agenda, and then had to have something as a plan B, if you like, if it doesn't go ahead. And I must say, I mean, make of that what you will as well. But if I was to pass a personal comment, I would say for him to shift from the debate and then to raise the issue and again highlight the now Roger Cook-led Labor government, that they will not answer the question whether the reviewers have requested all of the health advice for the pandemic inquiry that that Mark McGowan said that he would call. And I might also just add in relation to that as well, that when I interviewed Nick Goiran at Parliament a couple of weeks ago, he disclosed that the government has already flagged that once the pandemic inquiry has been determined, that before it's going to be tabled to Parliament, it's going to be held in a Labor Party caucus or cabinet meeting, where I guess they are going to look at how damning that report is, and they will have their heads up, and I guess using the powers and the numbers that they do with their parliamentary privilege to determine, what parts of the pandemic inquiry report is then communicated out to the West Australian people. So, so in asking the questions, will the reviewers, they won't ask what documents they're going to be relying on, that they're going to be looking at. There was even a question about a month ago in relation to this as to how many public submissions were received by the West Australian people who made a submission into this pandemic inquiry. Now, politically, what would be the reason why the government would not want to just answer a simple question? We received 500, we received 400, we received 5,000. I mean, really, what would they gain not to disclose that? You can only surmise, and this is nothing that information that I've based on the parliamentary website, because the government have disclosed that they're not going to reveal it. But if you are a gambling man, and I'm not saying that you should be, but I can only surmise that the number of public submissions was well in excess of what they actually anticipated for this particular inquiry. Of course, Mark McGowan, as we've even just heard in this package by the Labor backbencher, and her name just slips my mind, that she said that the government's objection of the day was to stop people from dying, keep people safe. And there was comments that I saw come through saying that, West Australian people were locked out of this state as a means of keeping them safe. So there's no answers there. This stream was, put together because I thought as soon as I spied the Labor Party motion on the debate scheduled for 2 hours, I just thought not only would I want to watch that, but there could be benefits by streaming this to you. Hopefully you have got some benefit, although the debate wasn't heard. And we can generate conversations, I guess, around that, because it certainly is public interest. It's the topic across the nation, apart from at the time or at the moment, federal parliament have now dropped the voice discussion, because it's now shifted as to whether Senator Katie Gallagher has misled Parliament in relation to the Brittany Higgins issue. So that is what I have to bring for you at the moment. As I said, I don't think, given the debate's not going ahead, I don't think that there is any more sense in bringing forward any more conversation around this. I think it's been discussed and you've heard the initial part. Again, I appreciate the comments that are coming through. I can see those comments there. So somebody just posted the comment of the name, it just slipped past, of the Labor backbencher there that was talking about that. I apologise, I didn't quite see it. you know, I do appreciate those that take the time to watch, and you know, even irrespectively, it still takes time to prepare to push these streams out. And you know, if it's simply, and I guess my intent of doing that is based on your engagement, because at the end of the day, you know, I can only bring to you the insights that that people may not know where to go and get it. But I think it's important that it's communicated and put into a central depository, if you like this platform, Freedom Media, where the comments coming through, people can then engage in the particular topics in one central point without censorship. So the only comments that we remove on the platform are comments with links. Unfortunately, I've said this before, but there is a lot of the Nigerian cryptocurrency spammers that post links to individual people that comment on this platform. And in order to protect those that do follow the platform and do comment, and again, I can't thank you enough for that. You know, I've taken it. I've made the decision that to protect your personal interest, that I don't want somebody clicking inadvertently on a link that turns out to be spam, and the only way I can do that is to filter no links. Any other comments, you know, you're free to make any comments as you see fit. Those may like the stream, those may not like the stream. Either way, I think it's important. You know, it's not going to change what I'm seeking to do, and that is to bring you the views and the discussions that perhaps are happening more in Parliament that people are not aware of and that mainstream media will not cover. So I think on that note, thank you for those that have commenting. I certainly appreciate all of those. I was going to finish, and I certainly don't want to fall into the trap of keep going, but I am just going to touch on a particular comment that's just come through now from Helen Bongo, and that is in relation to the Aboriginal Heritage Act. And as Helen has said, please investigate that, and it's a request as soon as possible. So I can tell you that I am working on that. There is a lot to this piece of legislation that actually, in fact, comes into effect on July the 1st this year. Now, I will just perhaps spend 5 minutes talking about that, and I will firstly just say that tomorrow. I'm pretty confident, subject to timing availabilities, that I will have the opposition member for mining and pastoral, the Honourable Neil Thompson. I will be doing an interview with him at Parliament in relation to this particular bill. Now, yesterday in the Legislative Assembly, this bill came up for lengthy debate. It was 2 hours, and I sat through and watched every word of that debate, and I do that so that you don't have to. But let me break it down for you. In essence, it's amendments to the Aboriginal Heritage Act that seeks to preserve Aboriginal culture on parcels of land that have more, that any parcel of land that is 1,100 square metres or greater, if you're wanting to do development of that land or penetrate the surface of the land by 500 mils, half a metre, you will have to apply. There is a tiered approach, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, a permit approach that, in addition to local council or shire permitting for a structure, for example, a swimming pool, that's what's being touted. You will have to also apply for potentially a heritage survey, and then have a permit to determine that you're not disturbing ground that is of cultural significance. So Mick's saying there 500 mils. So I'm confident, Mick, that it is 50 mils. Sorry, Nick, you're saying 50 mils. I'm confident that it is 500 mils, and but there is, if you look at, say, for an example, a primary producer, right now they're seeding, so they till the soil, they turn the soil over because of the sparseness of the land that they have, and the categories of the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, as I mentioned, that at every stage of the process, so when you till the soil, although you're not penetrating 500 mils, you're turning it over, but the process is potentially seeking to have the farmers apply for a permit. Similarly, when you harvest and then turn that the crop or what's left of the crop after you've harvested back into the soil, you have to apply for another permit. So what that essentially is going to do is that is going to add significant cost to the primary producer, and at the end of the day, who do you think pays for that? It gets passed on. We know that our West Australian farmers are finding that the big supermarkets, the likes of your multinationals, your Coles, your Woolies and so on and so forth, are not getting a fair deal in relation to what they are, that they do a tremendous amount of work to produce the grain and then it's sold on and they're making big profits. You can take grain for bread, you can take milk for your dairy producers. It doesn't matter what type of primary production you're in, but that's what it's looking like. So we are working on that particular story. I've reached out to the Honourable Nick Thompson, as I said, and I will be asking him some questions tomorrow at Parliament about this on the back of the of yesterday's debate in Parliament. And I will perhaps finish up with this. The opposition party came out and they sought to ask the government to press pause on this bill coming into effect at the 1st of July for 6 months. And the reason for that is to allow community consultation, among other things. And what you've found is that the government only in the last week or so have started to hold consultation events or workshops, as they're calling them, amongst the community of Western Australia, where government representatives are going out and they're telling farmers how this is going to impact. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a farmer. You could be some of the older suburbs here in Perth, Bassendean, Bayswater, those type of areas, that have the old quarter-acre plus blocks. That if you fall under that 1100, you've got plenty of properties up in the hills here, in Perth that would that this potentially will encompass. Now, there's plenty of provisions that the government's saying that if there's like for like and so on and so forth, that you will be exempt. The problem is the devil is in the detail. One of the things that the government said yesterday in relation to this is that they have consulted with the opposition bench and they have voted for this. So that's what Roger Cook, in fact, said in one of his opening speeches yesterday, as his first speech as Premier, that the opposition have supported this. Whereas in the debate that occurred later on, which he excused himself from the chamber, he wasn't present for that, and the debate went down. It was 45-5 after a division. So Labor have rammed through the opposition motion to request a pause on that piece of legislation for 6 months. 45 votes to 5, so it's coming in, it's going ahead. Roger Cook wasn't present for that debate, but it was revealed that the opposition in principle gave bipartisan support for the concept of preserving Aboriginal heritage. However, they were not privy to the detail. So, and that is that's quite an important detail. It was revealed by the Minister responsible for Aboriginal Affairs, Tony Butty, that he that a 200-page overview document was handed to the opposition bench 2 hours before they held a 1-hour meeting with the opposition to discuss this. It was not the proposed legislation. So I think that spells out what this particular issue is going to do. If there is ever a time that that in particular, because that's going to be where if you don't have the parcel of land where this falls in and under, then and you think that this won't impact on you, it will catch people out in terms of inflating even more the cost of living, because significant costs are going to be added to the man on the land, and for him, in order to do what they're doing, then they have to pass those costs off, or they simply stop producing. And that would be absolutely devastating in relation to that. And I think, so there is a lot to unfold. And what I was about to say, if there is ever an opportunity for the people who are not involved in primary production, but to support those in regional areas and in our country areas close to Perth and right across the state of Western Australia, we all know it's a big state, then there is a current petition on the parliamentary website, which as it stands, that was mentioned yesterday, there's about 13,000 signatories, and it's broken the all-time record of petitions that to be tabled in Parliament, and that petition closes next Wednesday. You don't have to be a primary producer or hold a parcel of land greater than 1,100 square metres to sign that petition. You just need to be a resident of Western Australia. So even though the government yesterday have said that they will not pause this legislation, I think to have a record amount of signatories on that petition so that it's tabled, it will be Neil Thompson himself that will be tabling the petition. Then do yourself a favour. I perhaps might look at putting the link to the petition on this stream, or I might save it for tomorrow. But at least explore the issue. I think I've said enough there. Thank you, Helen, for bringing up the topic. I'm certainly aware for it. That there is a lot to go on. Helen's talking about. I'm just having a look at the potential development in Western Australia. It's going to, at a time when the building industry is screaming out for people to do work, where the state of Western Australia is in a housing crisis, and this potentially is going to impact on development applications that will slow things down, and it's not just essentially linked to primary production. So I guess stay tuned for that. I have had a formal response back from the opposition member for mining and pastoral in WA, Neil Thompson, that he does and will give us an interview, and that will be at Parliament. Of course, Parliament is sitting this week, and it's a very busy time for him in relation to that. But he is trying to, as soon as there's an opening, we will be bringing you that story. So I think on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much to those, again, that have commented and that have watched the stream. It wasn't quite the debate that we were talking about, but I think that there was that added bonus there that we've seen. Again, Nick Goiran managed to flush out from the government that they are still refusing to add in a response as to whether the reviewers will actually have requested all of the health advice that the government relied on to lock down Western Australia and to lock down Western Australian people from leaving and returning back to Western Australia. So on that note, I'm going to sign off. Enjoy the rest of your day. And this is another News for You live stream brought to you by Freedom Media WA.
Brought to you by Freedom Media WA, where journalism should never be